You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast, season 2, episode number 100, the Cubs Ironman. Don't forget to listen, download, review, most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the socials, Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram, and Fly the W on Facebook, or email us at flythew670@gmail.com. Crawly, hope you had a nice Christmas and now getting ready for New Year's Eve.
Yeah, it's been pretty busy. I've been working on the Cubs cave a little bit, getting some things done, working on some pieces, getting some things framed, and just trying to enjoy a little bit. Like you said, New Year's coming up, so trying to have as much fun. And I am going to Winterland on Saturday, so that'll be fun.
All right, Saturday. So that Saturday is the 30th. I actually went yesterday, the 27th. Had a great time. My daughter's 12th birthday celebration with a couple of her friends, my wife, and my other daughter. So we all went down. Super great, super easy. All the workers, as usual, at Wrigley, super friendly, nice and spread out. Lots of fun. Things for all ages. There is food. There is booze. There are rides. There's lots of hot chocolate. Swag, everything you could need. My only complaint, Crawly, was afterwards, after the game, we're going to have lunch, right? We're going to have some lunch. So my kids like wings, and one of the girls that was with us likes wings. And I knew your recommendation, but I didn't know if I could get that past the goalie, right? So
Right.
if you weren't going to go, now you would say, where is your suggestion for those who don't know? Where is your ultimate
I
place
always
for
put
wings?
Output is the number one place for wings in Wrigleyville.
But just about, I don't know, 50 yards north of Output is where a lot of people think the best wings are in Wrigleyville, and that is?
Are you talking about, Full Shilling?
No, Yahtzee's.
Yahtzee's, okay.
Okay, right, about 50 yards north of Outpost, same side of the street.
Right.
Closed yesterday. Closed.
So the trouble
I went to Cane's. We were in Wrigleyville and we ate at Cane's. I could eat at Cane's anywhere. Totally disappointed.
The trouble with that is when you're going for like a lunchtime thing, most of the establishments don't open till about like 3-4 o'clock. And so if you're going for like a noon,
we got there right when it opened. We got there right when it opened. So it was about one, we were in there for about 2.5 hours. At that point, we were pretty chilled and needed some nourishment. And so we ended up at Cane's.
All right. Well,
nothing wrong with Cane's, but like lots of places were not open yet.
Yeah, they don't open. And if anyone's going down there, one that I really recommend, if you're coming right off the expressway off of 90 on Irving Park Road, there's a place called Big League Burgers. And so that's right when you get off the expressway, it'll be on your left-hand side, like literally right when you get off the expressway. It has some phenomenal food if you're going at around lunchtime, because they will be open.
All right, so enough about food, but if you haven't had a chance now, how long is Winterfest open until like the 7th?
Until about the 7th, and then the next weekend is CubsCon. So yeah, you got about a week left if you haven't been out there yet.
If you haven't done it, absolutely something to do. So Crawly, as we sit here on the 28th day, 29th day of December, the Cubs have still done nothing. And the moves altogether are pretty quiet since Ohtani and Yamamoto.
Yeah, Cleveland Guardians traded right-handed pitcher Cody Morris to the Yankees to center fielder Estevan Florial. On Wednesday, the Twins signed free agent right-handed pitcher Josh Daumont. And today, on Thursday, when we're recording this, the White Sox have signed left-handed reliever Tim Hill. So no earth-shattering moves. But Dustin, the Twins signing was big because that means 29 out of the 30 teams in MLB have added a player to their big league roster through free agents, signings, or trades. The only team that has not added anyone, your Chicago Cubs.
I mean, that's pretty wild that they're the only team that has not added anybody. And I'm okay with, why would you add a guy just for the sake of adding a guy, right? And I mean, nobody's suggesting that, but there are enough holes. I mean, they've got a bullpen to rebuild too. So I'm not quite sure what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
And by the way, I did not see Jed or Carter on the bumper cars at Winter Wonderfest. So that's not
where they were.
That's not where they're at. If you're wondering, they're not on the bumper cars, but the bumper cars are fun.
I just got to say though, I mean, could we see some movement before New Year's? Sure, maybe. But I mean, we're going to have to definitely see some movement in January because Dustin, pitchers and catchers report February 13th. So we're talking about a month and a couple of weeks, so like 6-7 weeks till pitchers and catchers report. So again, we've talked about, Boris controlling a lot of what's going on and just waiting for for the dominoes to fall. And once they do, it's going to be in quick succession. But right now we're at a point where we're wondering who's going to blink first. Is there going to be a team that jumps at one of those Boris clients and then everybody kind of scrambles like a game of musical chairs? So waiting and seeing, but it makes you nervous to see, Jed trying to thread this needle. It's as for Cub fans, it gets you nervous.
Yep, absolutely gets you nervous. And part of that nervousness or part of their lack thereof doing something has an effect on the attendance, Crawly. And we've got some 2023 attendance numbers to go over.
Yeah, no surprise. Cubs attendance went up as they were in the playoff hunt until the last weekend of the season. Everyone knows that summertime just really was rocking and rolling. And Dustin, there's nothing better when the Cubs are in it at summertime in Wrigley. I mean, it's just perfect. The Cubs finished with an attendance of 2.8 million, which is really, really good. And it's up compared to 2.6 million in 2022. But when you think about what the Cubs were drawing from 2016 to 2019, they were drawing, Dustin, an average of 3.2 million fans per season. So those numbers, what are you talking about? 4 million that are, that you're, or not 4 million, but 400,000 that you're down. I mean, that's not, nothing there,
No, it's nothing to laugh at, nothing to sneeze at, as some would say.
Yeah. And so if when we look at the attendance, and this graphic comes from Bleacher Report here, is the best attendance. If you take a look, number one was the Dodgers with 47K. Yankees averaged 40K per game. Padres 40K. Cardinals 40K. Braves 39, Phillies 38, Astros 37, Blue Jays 37. Then you get to the Cubs at number 9 at 34, and the Mariners with 32 as well. And so, or 33. But when you're looking at this, Dustin, I guess the thing that jumps out to me from this graphic here is when you talk about the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Padres and the Braves and the Phillies, Houston, Toronto, Seattle. Those were all teams that made the postseason the previous year, and people thought that they were excited going into the season.
They're going to run it back, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And the Cardinals always they have a huge season ticket base. And even though they averaged 40K, they didn't have 40,000 crossing the gates, but those were 40,000 paid tickets. But, the Cubs, when we went into last season, we had a lot of uncertainty. We didn't walk into 2023 thinking the Cubs were going to be as close as they were to the postseason. And so, I mean, that just goes to show you, Dustin, how A, loyal Cub fans are, but B, when you put a winning product on the field, the fans are going to come. And when you go in April and the weather's miserable and there's not a lot of fans, I mean, a lot of those numbers are happening when, you're in those summer months. So if the Cubs want to continue to move those numbers up, they got to get the fan base excited. They got to be making moves. And hopefully, they'll get to those numbers where they were in 2016, 2019, when they averaged 39,000 per game.
Right. And now, Crawly, on a best day at Wrigley, what, 42,000?
Right. Yeah. It's 41,500, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, keep that in mind when we're talking about these attendance numbers, but it is, it is not as great as you might think. And those are a lot of empty seats. So when we talked about, well, wait a minute, you can't sell any more seats. You can't charge any more for beer. They have 6,000 to 7,000 seats a game on average going unused. Ohtani would have guaranteed a sellout for every single game.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's not guaranteed a sellout. Now, I don't know that Bellinger is going to guarantee a sellout for every single game, but Ohtani would have guaranteed a sellout for every single game. Every seat would have been accounted for. Now, it doesn't mean everybody's going to show up. Doesn't mean everybody's going to go through the turnstile. Doesn't mean everybody's going to have a hot dog and a beer. but every single seat would have been sold.
Yeah, and for a while the Cubs were just averaging above 3 million fans for that period of time, 16, 17, 18, 19, and then the pandemic comes, and then you're slow to kind of get back, but it's not the automatic sellout that people think it once was. And so if you want to get back over the 3 million attendance mark, I don't think people are just going to do it just to go to Wrigley Field or just to see the Cubs. You have to be the Cubs, considering, when you think about how bad 2022 was, Dustin, in every episode it was, we predict the Cubs hopefully don't get swept. I mean, they do still have a good fan base considering how they've done since 2021. I mean, you look at the south side of town and you look at attendance numbers. I mean, just absolutely, they don't have, a lot of teams don't have what the Cubs do that they have. You can guarantee probably 20,000 per game, right?
Right.
But if you want to get up to that 38, 39, 40, then you're going to have to do something. It's just not going to be, a couple of retreads out there and thinking that people, you're not going to get Jorge Soler, and one other guy and think that you're going to hit over that 3 million mark again.
No, it's different. It's not what it used to be, especially with Marquee and the different apps out there. Access to seeing the games is easier than ever. So getting people in attendance is not just turnkey as it used to be. This is the Fly the W670 podcast. It's episode 100 of season 2, the Cubs Ironman. Don't forget to listen, download, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. And don't forget to leave those 5-star reviews in this segment. Crawly has already started that winter reading, and as you may have already guessed, they are books about the Cubs. That's right, Crawly and the Cubs, peanut butter and jelly. Author John St. Augustine joins Crawly to talk about his book, Ironman. John worked with Randy Hundley to tell his story of the legendary Cubs catcher's life.
Joining me on the Fly the W podcast, I'm happy to have on John St. Augustine. He is the author of the book Ironman that he worked on with Randy Hundley, legendary Cubs catcher. How you doing today, John?
Paul, great to be with you. So excited to do this, talk about this fantastic book and the opportunity to shed a little light on the Iron Man of baseball, Randy Hundley.
Now, when we talk about Randy, what was it, do you think, that made him finally decide to want to kind of tell his story?
I think because when he turned 80 years old, he realized he's running out of time. He and I had talked about this over the last 10 years. We've been friends a very, very long time. I did not think I would be the guy to do it. I mean, I've written a lot of books for a lot of people and my own stuff and things like that. But we went back and forth, and I thought, he's got a story to tell like everybody does. The route to Major League Baseball for him was not certain, but it became one that was very, very powerful. And obviously, as Cub fans, we all know that. So when just after he turned 80 years old, he called and asked if we go to breakfast. I said, sure. So we're at breakfast. He's kind of fidgeting, which means he probably doesn't want to pay the check. He wants me to pay the check. But in all seriousness, he says, I think it's time to write the book. I said, great. Good luck with it. He goes, no, I want you to write it. Okay.
Wow.
And then I said, Randy, there's 20, 30, 40, 50 guys in this town that are pure sports writers that would really be able to do something with this. He said, I trust you. What am I going to say? No. So a lot of work went into it. And I make the comment in the back of the book and the afterword. There's a great book called Tuesdays with Maury. And this became Wednesdays with Randy for over 6 months, 8 months, somewhere there. Every Wednesday we go to breakfast, and he would be mobbed by Cub fans. It's amazing to me, Paul, that people were remembering stuff from 67, 68, 69, 70, and we're all talking about it in the parking lot before and after breakfast. So once we finished that, we would go to his house, and we would talk for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever it took, about everything you can imagine about his life. And after 6, 8 months of that, then it was my turn to kind of burrow into my studio and take all these parts of the puzzle and put it together in something which you now have there called Iron Man.
And when I read the book, the thing that really, to me, there's two people that really play an important role in Randy's life. Obviously, the first one being his father. And it was just so interesting, the impact that Randy's father had on his career. I mean, everything from coaching him to being his first agent to PR guy, and the one thing I think that, maybe just doesn't even get credit is that his father was the one that taught him how to catch one-handed, which is basically normal now, but was not the norm back then.
Yeah, 100% right, Paul. So his dad, Cecil Randolph Hundley Sr., one tough SOB. This guy weighed 155 pounds if he's lucky, but he was built like, pig iron. He played semi-pro baseball for over 20 years. He was a catcher. He broke every bone in his throwing hand, many times over. And he was a prodigious home run hitter. I found an article with a headline. It says, Hundley hits 560-foot home run. I mean, come on. So when it was time for young Randy to learn the game, of course, he turned to his dad, was kind of his hero. And he went through all the different positions on the diamond. And his dad said, you could be a great pitcher, but you could ruin your arm. We don't want that. So after he'd gone through all that, there's only one place left. That's behind the plate. And you're 100% right. Back then, in the day, catching two-handed with a mitt and holding the other hand right next to it was the norm. And that's where all those foul tips and things like that took those guys out, bent fingers, what have you. And he said, you're going to learn to catch one-handed. I do not want to see that right hand up there. And I'm coming to get you if I see that hand up there. And Randy tells the story of his dad putting his finger in his forehead at like 8, 9 years old and scaring the crap out of him. And that stayed with him his whole career. He said, we'd be playing in St. Louis. I'm up against, Bob Gibson and Lou Brock and all these guys. And I'm hearing my dad in my head saying, don't put that hand up there. I'll come get you. So it was very profound. And you pointed out, if his dad had not done that, I'm sure somebody else would have come along, but it just happened to be Hundley. He was the first one-handed catcher in MLB history. And after that, Johnny Bench followed. And once Johnny Bench followed, that was it.
Yeah. And one of the there's so many good stories if you are a true baseball fan throughout the book. And I remember listening to there's a famous story where Ron Santo and Billy Williams were coming up, and Roger Hornsby basically told each guy whether they should go back home and get a different job,
Right.
or if they were going to be MLB
Right.
players. And I found it really interesting. I didn't know this, that Randy got some good hitting advice when he was a young prospect from Hank Sauer.
Yes.
And maybe not a lot of Cub fans know this, but Hank was a very popular player in Chicago in the early 1950s, MVP in 52. And I always love when the old generation passes on advice to the new generation, like Hank Sauer passing his knowledge on to Randy Hundley.
I'm reminded every time when Craig Counsell, who was the new manager, was playing, he had his bat way up in the air. Remember that? He'd be twirling way up in the air. And Hundley did something, similar to that. He would time pitches by twirls. And after about 6 or 8 pitches, he walks over and says, that's not going to cut it, kid. So Hank Sauer, if you read his stats, was Superman back in the day. I mean, it was incredible what he accomplished. He also wore number 9, by the way. And I'm not sure there was any connection when Yosh gave Randy number 9. He knew that it was really Hank, it was kind of continuing the legacy of Hank Sauer. And eventually Hobby would wear it in 2016. But that few minutes in the batting cage, even though Hundley is not known for his power and for home runs, I mean, and hit, all that stuff that maybe Bench would be known for, some of these catchers today, it shifted him into a position of being a very strong hitter back at a time when catchers weren't really known for this, because they were just expected to catch, and that's all they did. So they didn't really care what your batting average was. But Hundley, if you read his game summaries, which there's a lot of them in the book, you can see he was a very clutch hitter when it mattered. He had more home runs in his rookie year at that time than any catcher, 19 of them. So, he knew his way around the plate, and Hank Sauer had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, just, so cool. And then, when I think about Randy's debut, September 27th, 1964, it's at Wrigley Field of all places against the Cubs. And if that's just not poetic justice, but just thinking about his teammates that day, Matty Alou, Willie Mays, Orlando Cepeda, Willie McCovey, Duke Schneider. I mean, that had to have been intimidating, but man, can you just imagine how much knowledge and learning how to play the game the right way when those are the guys on the bench next to you?
Yeah, no doubt about it. One of the great pictures we came across that Randy had from his archive is that picture of him squatting at Wrigley. You can see right field clearly behind Randy, doing that. And he was brought into that game to pinch run for Duke Snyder, of all people. He wasn't brought in to catch right away. And you're right. How profound was it that eventually he would come to the Chicago Cubs not much longer after that and make that his home for so long. But there's also a picture there, I believe it was the 1966 Topps rookie card, and Randy smiling big time. He's just a kid, and he can't believe he's on the Topps rookie team card list. And he said, "Do you know why I'm smiling so much?" I'm like, "Well, I guess because you made the Topps team." He goes, "No, McCovey, Cepeda, and Willie Mays are all making fun of me off behind the photographer. I think they were mooning him, but we cleaned it up for the book."
And like you said, he came in to pinch run, but his very first start happens on June 28th, 1965. The first pitcher he ever has to face is Don Drysdale. I mean, come on. I was talking to my dad, who's a huge Hundley fan, and it's just like, oh, Drysdale was a headhunter. I mean, can you imagine that?
No, and there's so many versions. Randy would talk about his view of this, obviously, but he remembers having conversation with Drysdale later, and Sandy Koufax, who was the second one, and later on down the line with Bob Gibson. These great, powerful pitchers that you got to go up against. And look, I like the game today, but I got to go back to those days when these guys were pitching complete games. They were men among men back then, not 2 innings here, 4 innings there. So these guys were bringing the heat all the time. And Drysdale, as you said, was a headhunter. His job was to make sure you didn't want to step back in the box again. So Hundley's first at bat, Roseboro, who's catching, says, "You better watch your butt because it's coming." And Randy's like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And next thing you know, here's Drysdale yelling, "Watch out," because it's coming right for his head. And after a while, he just wore him flat out. And it was either him or the Koufax story where he realized he's not going to hit anything. He should just pack a lunch and go home. It was pretty funny.
Now, Randy is going to come to the Cubs for a trade on December 2nd, 1965, along with Bill Hands. And it's interesting, the relationship those two men have. They're kind of interconnected throughout their careers, Randy and Bill Hands. But, he comes to the Cubs, and they had hired legendary manager Leo "the Lip" DeRocher, who, I've heard a lot of different Cubs from that 1960s team talk. And to me, it was interesting because I feel out of everybody, it seems like Randy had the closest relationship, if anyone really could, with Leo "the Lip. And as far as the trust that Leo had in Randy.
Yeah, that's a good observation, Paul, because, DeRocher called the trade of bringing Hundley over the greatest thing since Gabby Hartnett. I mean, no pressure, right? And no pressure on this kid to come over and be the next Gabby Hartnett. And I think he understood, look, Leo DeRocher, for all his faults, was an incredible ball player and incredible manager. And you had to learn how to deal with his managerial style. These guys were not, there was no politically correct back then. Just put that out there right out the gate. So when Randy was earning his wings, so to speak, with Leo just pushed on him mercilessly to see what he had. And I think, we make the comparison in the book. Some sports writers called Leo the baseball equivalent of Vince Lombardi. I mean, it's the same in your face, up your butt, let's get this done kind of deal. And I think Randy needed that. He at one point we're having this long conversation about DeRocher, and I said to him, "Hey, did you ever make the comparison between Leo DeRocher and your father?" And he sat back in his chair at the house where we're drinking coffee. He said, "Never thought of that before, but they are the same guy in so many different ways." So he needed that push, and I think that's what brought out the best in Hundley. And when the day came and Leo finally tipped his cap and said, "You're the guy out there, you're the field general," the confidence that brought up in him never ended.
Now, obviously, that the Cubs 60s team, they were all just a close-knit group.
Yeah.
But it seemed, that the connection between Randy and Fergie was just so important. And Fergie wrote the foreword to the book Ironman, and Randy wrote the book forward for Fergie's book. It's
right.
just, I was there when Fergie got his statue at Wrigley Field, on Statue Row, and when I talked to Fergie, just the high praise that he had towards Randy Hundley. The connection between those guys is just absolutely. I just wonder if it was immediate or if it was something that took a little time to build.
It's so interesting. There's so many sort of back themes to this book, Paul, and one of them is that you got to recall the time these guys played in. The 60s was turbulent, to say the least. This is, people think things are tough now. You take a look from 60 to 69, what we went through as a nation and the world. And so you got Vietnam, you got civil rights, you got the Democratic National Convention, you got 4 people assassinated in 5 years, and the racism that was going on back then was rampant. So you have this black Canadian flamethrower, and you got this country boy from Virginia, and you're going to put them together in Chicago, which is a hotspot for all the things going on with civil rights. And in some ways, there was an immediacy because, they're pros, right? They're rookies, but they're pros. The second thing and Randy talked about this. He said, it just comes out to realize that color doesn't matter except whatever uniform you're wearing. Now the players got that, but outside the park, that wasn't always the case. And so I think it didn't take very long for them to realize the importance of this relationship. In that time, you got the white catcher from the country and the black pitcher from Canada, and you're putting them out there constantly, and their success is undeniable. I believe it was something like, I can't remember what Fergie wrote in the forward, but Randy caught more of his games than anybody else he threw to, including Jody Davis, including Jim Sundberg. So those type of things mattered. And when I sat with Fergie this past August, we talked about the forward just before the book was printed. I was at the Hall of Fame game with Dunston and Mark Grace, and we were all there together. And he says, it's about time this book got done. This guy is so humble, meaning Randy. I'm surprised he said anything about getting a book done. He's not a promoter. He doesn't call attention to himself. He just shows up and does his job. So we were so fortunate and humbled to have Fergie write a great forward to the book. It's fantastic.
Now, speaking of those 60s Cubs, obviously 1969 is the one that both, I think, revitalized the franchise, but at the same time, it was so crushing for anybody that lived through it. Yeah. And it was, the strange thing is that, the amazing Mets are the ones that passed them and went on to the World Series, et cetera. But it seems like all the weird games that were negative happened against the Mets. Don Young missing 2 balls, which caused some controversy for Ron Santo. There was the black cat game where some black cat came out of the, who knows where, and circled around Santo on the on-deck circle.
Yeah.
But to me, the one that what Randy talks about is a game that was tied at 2, and Tommy Agee looked like he was thrown out at the plate. Rookie umpire makes a call, and to me, I don't think Randy ever got over that. And I remember I was there, I was in a documentary called Wait Till Next Year, and Randy, they had footage of Randy after that call, and he literally is hopping mad.
If you want to piss off Randy Hundley, just say Tommy Agee and say Shea Stadium. That'll set him right off, even at his age of 81 now. It's that was the first chapter of the book I wrote because it lit his fuse. We had breakfast that morning. We went back and talked. We're just talking. I got the tape rolling. Nothing. It's all informal. No real pointed questions. And he says, "I'll tell you one thing. Agee was blooming out at the plate at Shea Stadium." That's how this starts. The whole book started with that. So that's the first chapter that I wrote. And if they would have had instant replay like we have now in reviews, he'd have been out by a mile. Hundley tagged him, and later, before Agee passed away, he admitted he was tagged. Todd, Randy's son, played in New York for 12, 13, 14 years, whatever it was. And before went to the Dodgers and back and forth with them. But he ran into Agee and he said, "Well, tell your dad I know I was out, but I'm not going to tell him that." So, but you're 100% right. There was this domino effect of these plays that seemed to culminate in this tag thing. And while he points out in the book, it probably wasn't the most important play of the year. It was definitely the most telling. It was kind of the core sampling of how this season was going to go. So close, yet so far. And the pictures in the book, man, I had more fun digging through thousands of pictures, literally, to find the right pictures that go in there. So that hopping up and down thing, that's in the book.
Just it's something that always is kind of in my head when I think about Randy. And like I said, I didn't know he could jump that high. I'm looking though, 1972, he's one of a few catchers in all history to catch 2 no-hitters in one season. I don't know if people remember the Burt Hooton no-hitter. That was the first one. Yeah. And then the second one is infamous in Cubs lore. That's Milt Pappas. Perfect game going with 2 outs in the 9th, a 3-2 pitch, and Bruce Fleming called ball 4 on a borderline pitch. I don't know how Randy was able to settle Milt down. Milt was bitter about that until his dying day.
Yeah.
About that perfect game. But to think 2 no hitters and nearly a perfect game in one season. That is a rare accomplishment.
Yeah, there's only 5 catchers that we could find when I did my digging that have done that. I don't remember the other 4 guys, but Randy's one of them. And he talked about Bert Hooten. Hooten never played minor league ball in his life. He's a phenom. He came out and he had this, knuckle curveball thing that would drop off. Randy said it was as effective as Koufax's curveball. I mean, that's saying a lot. So he caught that game. And, of course, the infamous Fleming incident that, just endeared Bruce Fleming to Cub fans forever. Not. He talked about how difficult it was. And what Fleming was saying is like, if he comes up another step off that mound, he's out of here. You don't want that. And so Randy had to go settle him down and say, look, you got a no-no going here. I mean, a perfect game would be great, but we got to take care of business. And that the first time, then he had to go out and settle him down again. And he said the hardest part, though, was after the game was done, having Milt strangle Bruce Fleming at some point, But, yeah, it was very, very cool.
Now, that obviously teams can't stay together forever, and that 69 team's going to kind of break out. But there's some interesting characters that are going to come after. And, the one guy, I was at Club 400, our mutual friend, Stuart McVicker, and this was a few years back, and it was Joe Pepitone and Randy wasn't even on the bill. He just kind of showed up because Randy loves Club 400 and what it's all about. And all of a sudden it was the two of them. They were roommates. Yeah. Leo didn't trust Pepitone. And so he basically makes Hundley be his roomie. And the stories between those two, you got the foul mouth New York, first baseman.
Yes.
And you got Randy Hundley, who's never said a swear word in his life.
Right.
And the two of them, it is literally one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life.
Man, I wish I could have been there for that. I'll tell you, Joe Pepitone passed away during the writing of this book. And Randy, for 2 or 3 days, was inconsolable. He loved the guy so much. And to see, he hadn't talked to him for a while, and to see that kind of emotion from Randy just really shed a lot of light on their friendship and their relationship. And you're 100% right. We put a few stories of Pepe in there, but there's some stuff you just can't put in print. It's just not a good idea. And you're right. So Randy's version and Randy's vocabulary of shoot and shucks is a little different than what Pepitone would have told the story. But my favorite one that we do have in the book, and I just share this here real quick, is that apparently Pepitone had a motorcycle, and he parked it on purpose outside of DeRocher's office at Wrigley. And so he would deliberately get on the motorcycle and start revving it up, and just to piss off Leo. And eventually Leo figured that something to do with the handles, because he's driving the motorcycle, was screwing up Pepitone's wrist, which changed his batting. Probably not true, but it was a way for Leo to dig into that. And so the whole story goes is that Randy gets called up to Leo's office, and he thinks he's being traded. And he comes out and he says, well, your roommate, he's got a motorcycle, and it's ruining his batting because of all that's going on. And Randy's like, what do you want me to do about it? And he says, well, we're going to have a meeting. I want you to go find Pepitone and tell him to keep his mouth shut in the meeting and not say anything. I don't know where he's at. Go find it for this meeting. So Randy tracks Pepitone down because he's smoking a joint in a bathroom stall somewhere, and he follows the smell of the weed to connect with Pepitone. He hauls it back to the meeting, and Leo starts in with his stuff and going. Now I think this is 1971, 72, somewhere in there. Pepitone's been around for a little while. He's got his fake hair on and the sideburns and the whole thing. And at the end of Leo's rant, he raises his hand. Pepitone raises his hand, and Randy's like, what are you doing? And Pepitone says, Leo, Ralph Houck doesn't manage this way. What is your problem? Oh, my gosh. It just set DeRocher off in every direction. And then stuff about Ron Santander got pulled in, and then the GM had to come down, and people are at each other's throats. And he said at one point there was 4 guys restraining Ron who wanted to strangle DeRocher. DeRocher's ready to quit. And Randy's sitting there and looks over at Pepitone, is just enjoying the show.
He was, and just an amazing guy, Pepe. And just like I said, that's what Randy would call me. Say, Pepe, hey Pepe. And
and Paul, no slouch, 2-time Gold Glove, All-Star. I mean, this guy had the goods. He was not just a loudmouth. He was a great guy, great ball player.
Now, after Randy gets traded, he goes to the Twins in 74, the Padres in 75. And just like I said, it's just baseball is such fortuitous, just the way things work sometimes. He finishes his career with the Cubs. And in the book, you guys talk about this last home run that he hits that, if you want to tell that story, that one really kind of got
to me. We talk about the double? We got
Yeah.
on second. It was a double, actually. So his first time up, I think it's the 8th inning. Kenny Rudolph had been catching at that point. Randy comes in. He's back from playing with San Diego. He just didn't feel like, he was done with baseball. The Padres actually offered him a managerial spot. He turned it down. He still wanted to play. So he goes up back with the Cubs. He's in his first game back. I think Dutch Rennert, one of the best umps of all time. You ever go watch a Dutch Rennert highlight video? He would just scream like that. It was great. So Dutch Rennert's catching. They're playing Dutch Rennert's the ump. I'm sorry. They're playing the Mets, actually. And Randy gets up and just drills a double off the wall in left center field. He's standing on second base, and he said, "I knew I was home again." It was a capacity crowd to play against the Mets. Everybody watches that. And they just stood a standing ovation. He saw some of the Mets players giving him an ovation because everybody's kind of in the same boat. He said it was the most emotional moment for him in his entire career to have those accolades come down on him and be back home and finish his career with the Cubs where he knew he always would be. Pretty emotional.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Padres offering him a managerial career, and he was hoping to go that pathway with the Cubs, and unfortunately it didn't work out.
Right.
And again, it's weird how life works out because, there he is, baseball's over. What's he going to do next? And just out of happenstance, the idea of a fantasy camp comes out. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there's a gap here, right? So they bring him up once he's, quote, retired from playing. They bring him back as a bullpen coach / emergency catcher. And, that lasts for a little while. That's, his introduction to becoming a manager at some point. So they send him down to AAA. He does really well there, and it bounces around back and forth. And at one point, they're going to do a revamp of the Cubs minor league teams. And he was told he'd have a bunch of new players coming in he could work with. He was very excited about this. Now, you got to remember, too, back when he played, these guys would have off-season jobs. This is not like now where there's a guaranteed contract of X amount of dollars. Even if you get fired, you're paid for the rest of your life. None of that existed at this point. So prior to the managerial thing, he was working, selling cars or working in insurance or at a company at the bank or, trading stocks and stuff like that. So it was a very different time. So managerial position would be stability for him and his family. And you look at the catchers that have been great managers, Rossi and some of these other guys have all been catchers because of the way they see the game. And that didn't turn out. They fired him, and he was bent. Let me just tell you that. So that option was off the table. Had to figure something out. Went home, sulked for a few days, and a friend of his, Rich Melvin, who's the guy that started all the Let Us Entertain You restaurants in Chicago, said, "Hey, about doing kids camps." So they went to Harper College, which is not far outside of Chicago. Approached the AD there. The AD knew who he was. "We'd love to have you here." In record time, these camps filled with kids, 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week. And Randy said it wore his hillbilly fanny out because these little kids are running around learning the game and stuff. So after one season of that, somebody asked him, it was probably Melman again, or he had a partner at the time who, was with him for a little bit, said, "What about getting some of your former teammates to come teach the kids?" And he said, that's when the epiphany came. He had this thought that if he could recreate the major league experience, spring training especially, but major league experience for fans, guys like you and me, that had never been done before. It did not exist. There was a couple corporate things here. You could have Bob Gibson come out and sign your ball or something, but certainly not suiting up, certainly not playing with the pros against the Joes. That had never happened. So in 1982, late 81 into 82, he started reaching out to friends and guys that he had played with and said, "This is what I want to do." And he had his first camp in January of 1982. And within 6 months, the next one filled up. We talk about in the book how important that was because Leo DeRocher agreed to be the coach of his former teammates in that second fantasy camp, Pepitone included. And Santo was there. And there was a great reconciliation to a greater or lesser degree because of what had happened in the clubhouse years earlier between him and Santo. And at one point in the after the ball game, they have these big dinners. And Leo got up and was just emotional and talked about, how wrong he was in busting on Santo and a lot of these guys, something you'd never thought Leo DeRocher would do. The whole room you could hear a pin drop. And so it went on from there. And for 38 years until COVID hit, the Randy Hundley fantasy camps were out 2 or 3 times a year. I played the 1993 camp. It was a fascinating and fantastic experience for me. First paid writing gig I ever had. Chicago Sports Profile magazine. cover the Randy Hundley Fantasy Camp, and you're going to pay me $250. Where do I up and sign up for this? And it was fantastic. And then we became friends, and that's how all the rest of this unveiled. But there's a whole chapter in the book about the campers. They supplied me these stories. I had way more than I could use, but a special shout out to Beth Chaplin in Minnesota, who's been to 30 camps, 35 camps. The first time she ever went was with her dad's. It was the first father-daughter camp experience. And the transformational experience this showed up when we did our book launch this past August, at La Villa on the northwest side of Chicago, best Italian in the city. Little plug for La Villa. And we had, over 250 people show up, and a huge contingent of the fantasy campers came, some wearing jerseys and all that kind of stuff to see their coach. And real quick, Fergie Jenkins points out in the opening of the book, in the forward, that while Randy never managed at the level he would have liked to in the bigs, for 38 years, he managed thousands and thousands of very talented people who want to play in the fantasy camps. That's really something to be celebrated.
And again, now you see other teams doing the same thing.
It's everywhere.
It was Randy who was the first to do it. And when you listen to the campers talk and you read their stories, to them it was something sacred. It was something very important. And you talk about the pros versus the Joes, but you also had celebrities there: Phil Donahue, John Cusack, Chris Chelios. And for a lot of Cub fans, they don't realize that Eddie Vedder, Pearl Jam, who is, my understanding, going to play Wrigley this August.
Yes.
That Eddie wrote the song "Someday We'll Go All the Way" at the request of Ernie Banks at Randy Hundley's fantasy camp. Can you just imagine that?
It's a movie, man. I mean, come on. I mean, to see Eddie Vedder sitting there with Ernie Banks strumming on the guitar, writing this song, and Ernie's like, snap, yeah, it's pretty good, Eddie, keep going. It's just the stuff dreams are made of, and you're 100% right. There's a great picture of Eddie in the book and talked about that experience. Bob Surratt, who's at WGN here in Chicago radio, he went to the camp early on in 1983. So, he's in the book. There's a great picture of him and Ernie because they were locker mates. Mark DiCarlo, who is in Los Angeles, the comedian, the TV personality, he says it turns grown men into children, which is really important. Baseball, at its core, to me, is about remembering the 10-year-old boy or girl inside you that loved the game. Besides all the crap that gets surrounding on it, and that's what it gets down to. And to a person, the people, when they reach out to me after they've read this book, that's what happens. They are emotional, for better or for worse. The 69 team, it is what it is. For a long time, they were the most lovable losers in baseball, and there's not many of them left. Those guys are kind of few and far between. And so we achieved our goal, which was really on three things: to tell Randy's story, to show how this skinny little kid from Virginia ends up being an Ironman catcher in the big leagues, a premier catcher for years, Gold Glove, All-Star, the leader of the Chicago Cubs, and then he went on to this great other career as the fantasy camp guy. That was number one. Number two was to show the backdrop of where these guys played. I mean, again, not to beat it to the ground, but there's a story in there about the Cubs getting ready to play a exhibition game before the opening season in 1968, and they're in Indiana somewhere. And all of a sudden, Randy says he sees Fergie Jenkins running like a man with his hair on fire through the lobby of the motel and getting ready to, lock himself into his motel room. And Randy's like, what's going on? And they just found out that MLK had been shot. And Fergie says, they're coming for us next. Can you imagine having to go pitch? I mean, come on. Him, Billy Williams, all the players of color back then, they were put upon in ways you and I can't possibly, nor could the players of today possibly understand. So that was another piece. This was this historical part. And then the third part, I think, is the appreciation of the game before sliding mitts, before pitch clocks, before the whole outfield was adorned with signage, how baseball in so many ways is now an experience to be had, not just go to the game. When I was a kid back in the day, I'm probably got a few years on you, young fella there. I used to go, like you hear these stories, my mom would give me $10 for a doubleheader. We go on Saturday morning and take the bus down, walk up Clark Street and sit up and wait for the bleachers to open. And you can sit there all day for a doubleheader, get sunburned, yell your head off. I learned more words in left field my parents never taught me from the bleacher bums. And all of that stuff was like, those are the three pieces of the book. The pictures really, I think, pull all of it together. And I got to tell you, we are pleasantly surprised, quite frankly, with the success of the book, people buying it. we keep restocking. We just came through the Christmas season and sent out countless autographed, personalized copies to Cub fans all across the country. So, it has become a thing. And of all the projects that I've worked on in my career, which is well over 30 years now in radio and broadcasting and TV and all this work I've done, for literary and things, this is the best thing I've ever been a part of. We're friends, but it's more than that. And to see this for him, the accolades he's getting, to see him all dressed up at the book signings we've done and signing books endlessly and shaking his hand out because he's getting tired of signing books, man, it doesn't get any better than that.
I got to tell you, you talked about emotion, and I did get emotional when I read the last chapter of the book. It's called Extra innings.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was always his intention to write that chapter or your guys' intention to put that in there. But, it's, to me, it's hard because when I was a young kid and I'd go to CubsCon, I mean, when you looked at Hundley or when you looked at Ron Santo or Ernie Banks or everything, these guys were big, strong guys,
Yeah, yeah.
And, these guys used to just rib on each other. They, all these sessions at Cubs convention and they would all be, I remember, God, Becker ripping on Santo, or you would have, I always remember a funny one was always Jose Cardinal and Randy would sit there and rip on each other. And it was just so, you could just sense the love and admiration. And, time passed, what is it? Father Time's undefeated.
Yeah.
It's really, when I read about him talking about his wife, about his former teammates,
yes,
it really, is a reflection of his life. And, it really kind of hits you hard. And then that whole, winning the World Series, when the Cubs won it and Tom Ricketts and Crenny gave him a ring, a World Series ring. I mean, truly a great ending. And it just really brings the whole book full circle.
Yeah, it was tough to write that. He and I talked about what to include and what not. There were stories that we'd like to put in. We thought we'd revisit them, said, let's leave that out. It finds its own narrative along the way. These book projects find their own life, basically. And we got to that last chapter, we talked about that. How do you close this out? As you mentioned, his wife, Betty, passed away 20 years ago. It's been very, very difficult for him. It's not something you can prepare or plan for. And it took half of him away. He says that. I'm only half the guy I used to be because she's gone. And then the partners and the people he's worked with, some of them are gone. Then you get to the teammates and how much of that, as you said about Cardinal and these guys, they all bucked on each other. And you go down the roster, and I think there's only 17, 18, 19 guys left from the 60-19 team, including Pepitone, who came in 70, but we kind of lumped him in there. And it makes you look at these guys and the whole thing a lot different. At least it did for me. And I've known some of these guys over the years. And when we started talking about it, first thing he talked about was Ron Santo. He's literally getting ready to go play golf and see Ronnie, and he got a call from Ron Jr. Totally unexpected. He knew he was ill, but not that much, right? And then it goes to Ernie Banks. You start talking about that. And then you start going down the list of these guys who are no longer here. And these names are the names we grew up with, like you said. So not only is it his loss, Paul, it's our loss because that part of our childhood, whatever, that's gone. It becomes something in a history book. Glenn Beckert, like you said, I still have his autograph, my autograph book. I look at it now and again, this strong autograph of this guy. It's like, he cannot be gone. It's not allowed, but it is. And so really kind of winding it all up. Randy's 81 now. He's pushing towards 82 next June. He's had health problems. It's been up and down. There's some challenges there. But I will tell you, the thing that I found most interesting in all of that, even at his age, is that, his grip is as good as it's ever been. Sometimes I give him a boost up and he'll grab my hand. I'm like, damn, boy, what have you been doing all night? He has this inner fire in him that has not gone out. While the machine has its bumps and bruises and challenges, the inner spirit of Randy Hundley is right there. And no more is that prevalent when we'll be talking about something. For example, there's a story about Kenny Holtzman's no-hitter. Randy didn't catch that game. He was injured. So he's at home watching the game with a ruptured torn toe tendon or something like that. So he can't catch the game. I think it was either J.C. Hyatt or John Boccabella. And talking about that game that he's watching on television, not even catching, and it was against Atlanta. And Henry Aaron hits a ball that, had the wind not been blowing in, there's no hitter. It's gone. It would have been a one-hitter, and it would have been a run. And so we're recounting that, going back and forth. And I said, yeah, so as I'm writing this, I would review with him. And I said, well, the ball right center, or left center. He goes, no, stop. It was a dead left field. I'm sorry. It was dead left field. And he says, I remember seeing it clearly on TV. I don't remember seeing it clearly on TV. I'm just going by what the stats talk about where it's at. But he knew exactly where that ball had been hit. He knew exactly where Billy Williams was standing. He knew exactly what pitch Kenny Rudolph threw. I'm sorry, restart that. He knew exactly what pitch Ken Holtzman threw. So when he does things like that, I'm like, well, he's still there. So it's been a high education on baseball itself, not just his story, and all the other stuff that's in there about Morgana the Kissing Bandit and Clete Boyer and some of this stuff that he would recall. He would actually got embarrassed. We talked about, I saw this woman bouncing out of the stands, and she just bounced it. I can't remember who the ump was behind him, and they just started blushing. It was just a bit much for him. So it just, so much of this is will never leave me. I have this huge poster you can see behind me, but over on my wall of fame over there, I have a huge replication of the cover of the book. And for a guy like me, I talk about this in the afterword, for a kid like me, who at 10 years old was waiting on the corner for an autograph in 1970 during a rainout game, and I was getting ready to leave, and here comes Randy's red Corvette, and he stops, rolls the window down, and pulls me out of the rain and signs my mitt. And then 20 some odd years later, I'm writing a story about him, and then I'm playing in the fantasy camps and I'm writing his book. Come on, I mean, it's gold.
And when I first met Randy, as a younger man, he's kind of an intimidating presence. Like
he's very forward, yes.
Bird grip, very,
Yeah.
But God, a heart of gold. And I guess the thing to me that I still look at is the fire in the eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I have a picture in my memorabilia collection, an 8x10 of Hundley, and he's like looking into the camera, and you can just see it piercing, and it's just an unbelievable. It's one of my favorite autographs because it's like a picture to me that just encapsulates the complete essence of the man. And like I said, just a wonderful, wonderful book, and I really recommend it for any Cub fan, any baseball fan. I gave a copy to my father. He went through, he was done with it in about a day and a half.
Yeah, right.
He couldn't put it down. So I just really, it is called Ironman, legendary Chicago Cubs catcher Randy Hundley and John St. Augustine. I really appreciate you jumping on here and talking about the process, because it truly is a special book that I think all Cub fans would enjoy.
I will appreciate your time. And Randy sends his best wishes. He'd like to be here today, but it didn't work out. But we appreciate you flying the W for us and getting behind the book. It's great stuff. And I got to tell you real quick, my final story in is, I mentioned about being at the Hall of Fame game with Dunston and Grace going in. At one point, we were up in the booth. They gave us a Ricketts booth, which was very nice. And then right next to it, Crane Kenny has his booth. So we're over there sitting. And Crane Kenny and I are going back and forth about different things about the game and stuff like that. And I happen to look down, and here's Billy Williams sitting here and Randy sitting here. And I'm sitting in between them eating ice cream out of a little Cub helmet, I'm thinking, I'm 64 years old, but I'm really 10 years old. I never would have guessed that. And to hear how they talked about the game between these two great grizzled, battered, all-star Hall of Fame veterans was stuff, too bad the book was already in print, because that would have added just to it. So I keep that picture on my camera, on my phone, when I want to be reminded about how special this journey is. Billy Williams here, and Randy's sitting here, and Crane Kenny's behind me, and I'm eating ice cream out of a little mini Chicago Cubs batting helmet. It was the best stuff, man.
Well, thank you so much, John. And Cub fans, get the book, Ironman. You're really going to love it.
Best place to do that, by the way, is lulu.com. The only place you can get it is lulu.com. It's not on Amazon for a lot of different reasons. Lulu.com. Put Ironman in the search bar, and there you go.
And we'll have all your information to link to it, and we'll be
Great.
good to go so people can get their copy of Ironman. Thank you so much, John.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
This is the Fly the W670 podcast. It's season 2. It's episode number 100. The Cubs Ironman. Crawly, great job with that interview. Don't forget to listen, download, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Don't forget to follow us on all the social media platforms, and don't forget the 5-star review. Crawly, some sad news for the Cubs family, those who attend Wrigley as much as somebody like yourself.
Yeah, it was on Tuesday that I got word that Rocco Caputo, longtime vendor at Wrigley Field, at Guaranteed Rate or whatever they're calling the Southside Stadium, the old Chicago Stadium, he passed away at age 56 of following complications from a liver transplant. He's had liver issues for a while, and he was able to kind of fight it off for a long time. Dustin, he began vending at Wrigley Field when he was 16 years old. And so his dad was a vendor. He vended for 40 years. And, he was, anyone that met Rocco, he was just an old school throwback kind of guy. Here's a picture of him if you're on the Score 670 The Score YouTube channel. But everybody knew Rocco for like I said, I'm a season ticket holder 24 years. So he was there the entire time. I've been going to games pretty much my whole life. And, he got a lot of notoriety when he appeared on Undercover Boss. So if you remember this, Todd Ricketts, one of the owners of the Cubs, so from the Rickett family, he decides to go under disguise. And one thing he decides to do is become a hot dog vendor. And it didn't matter if Rocco was selling beer or hot dogs, whatever. Rocco could just, he just had that natural gift and people would love to buy stuff from him. And so Todd Ricketts has to sell all these hot dogs. And basically he throws them in the garbage, but puts his own money so that it all equals out at the end.
So aggravated by that, Crawly. I mean, I was incensed. I went on a rant on that on the air. That was just an awful way of that. I did not like that at all. I hate throwing good food away, number one, and then trying to cover it up with, a millionaire times fives money to cover the cost so that he didn't have to finish the job.
Yeah, well, you weren't going to get that past Rocco, is what I would tell you. You weren't going to get that past Rocco, and Rocco just took a ton of pride in his work. And just, this was a picture I took with me and Rocco. This was right after opening day, not too long. It was, he just looked great. And I heard his health had kind of taken a turn for the worst after the off season and during the off season. So, he's just, when you go to Wrigley long enough, and this is the thing, Rocco followed in his dad's footsteps. And I know other beer vendors that I've been going to since I was, 21 years old, buying beers and their kids are now beer vendors and all that stuff. There's a camaraderie. There's a close-knit feeling amongst everybody that works at Wrigley Field. And you talked about it earlier when you went to Winterland, is that these people, whether it's security, whether it's the vendors, whatever, these are the people that make Wrigley the friendly confines. Every time they're just such amazing people, and they become like family. And so Rocco would a lot of times head over to Arizona, to Mesa, and a lot of the vendors will go do that. They'll go head over for a month and work in Mesa, and it's just a family, and they're just wonderful people. And to lose someone like Rocco is a tremendous loss. And it gets tough, Dustin, when, over the last few years, I feel like we've lost a lot of people at Wrigley, part of that family. And I guess it kind of comes with time, Father Time's undefeated. And I think, there's new people working there, but, for some of us that have been around a while, it's hard to kind of lose these guys. And Rocco was one in a million. He even got to go on after the whole Undercover Boss thing. He actually had Stephen Colbert came out. Stephen Colbert from the Late Show. And, he was a guy that would come around to Wrigley a lot when he was younger, and he came out and sold hot dogs with Rocco. So Rocco kind of became like this, celebrity at Wrigley Field vendor that people recognized him from, either Undercover Boss or from the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. And he just took all in stride. And if people asked for photographs or people asked for autographs or whatever, he wouldn't turn anybody down. And he, and he was just a great guy, and he will truly, truly be missed. Somebody that, larger than life figure, and condolences to his family. And, I'm sure the Cubs are going to do something, a tribute to him come opening day.
Condolences indeed. I remember him from the show, and then now seeing the pictures that you shared. Nice job doing that. I definitely remember seeing him at Wrigley over the years. We want to wish each and every one of you listeners a happy new year. It's been another great season for Crawly and I. I guess when we get back, Crawly, it's going to be season number 3, right? I mean, this is season number 2.
Yep.
Do we not kick off season 3 until actually we kick off opening day? I forget. We'll cross that bridge. I forget how it exactly works, but feels like it could be. It's episode number 100, though, of season 2. Pretty crazy. And again, hoping that you, Crawly, and everybody listening has a great new year.
Yeah, Dustin, it was a fun year. For us, this was our first season where the Cubs were in contention, and just the excitement from the fans and the great feedback and stuff that everybody gave us. it's a lot of fun, and we got a lot planned for the new year. So don't go anywhere, Cubs fans. We're going to be here. And when we come back again, that free agency should start moving. CubsCon is just around the corner, and we got a lot of fun coming up. So go Cubs. Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!